My brother stole my apartment while I was away. My family backed him. I kicked him out anyway, now he's broke, divorced, and begging for help. Don't be selfish. Think about the child, my brother remarked as he took over my flat. You have money. You can rent another place, his wife said, tossing my belongings away. I did not argue. I simply smiled and left. The expressions on their faces when I replaced the locks 48 hours later were unforgettable. My grandmother used to tell me that family pledges were sacred, and blood always came first. But when I returned to New York City after a business trip and discovered my brother residing in my flat, I understood it was a lie. "Oh, look who's back, Nathan," my older brother said, his grin way too easy for the occasion. He was sitting in my living room, his feet propped up on my coffee table, which was the same dark wooden table that my grandmother had purchased at a flea market in New Orleans, and that I had restored myself. It was now covered with crumbs and sticky cup rings. Jessica, his wife, was scrolling through her phone next to him, not seeming to be uncomfortable. Meanwhile, their youngster was playing on the floor with a toy car, but not just any toy car. My toy car. My grandfather gave me a little Chevy Camaro model when I was a child. A knot tightened in my stomach. I dropped my suitcase at the entryway, my gaze surveying the disaster. The rug I had brought home from Morocco was crumpled and stained with juice. I carefully hung a painting on the wall, but it was now crooked. Worst of all, my photographs had disappeared. "What are you doing here?" I inquired, my voice firmer than I felt inside. Jessica faked a small laugh. "Well, Nathan thought that since you were away we could settle in. It's hard to find a decent place with a kid, and since this was Grandma's house." They referred to it as Grandma's house, as if the will did not exist, and my name did not appear on the documents. "Settle in," I said in surprise. "Come on, don't make a big deal out of it," Nathan remarked, rising up and looking agitated. "Grandma always wanted this house to stay in the family, and you're alone, while we have a child. Do you really need this much space?" Anger consumed me like fire. "Grandma left me this apartment in her will," I responded with tight teeth. "It's not for the family. It's mine." Nathan gave a big sigh and shook his head. "Don't be selfish, Lauren. Think about the kid. Unbelievable. They not only stole my house, but they also tried to make me feel bad about it." "How did you have the nerve to move in without even telling me?" I questioned, feeling the heat build on my face. "Don't exaggerate," he said, gazing at me condescendingly. "We're just here until we find something better." I gazed about with disdain and despair. They had not just moved in. They had modified things in an attempt to eliminate my presence. The lavender plant I kept in the kitchen had vanished, replaced by a jar of baby formula. The handmade beige and blue blanket that my grandma had knitted was vanished from the sofa. In its place there was an unattractive synthetic blanket adorned with teddy bears. They were replacing me in my own house. Jessica stood up, crossing her arms, irritated. "If you were a generous person, we wouldn't be having this conversation," I laughed without humor. "If you were decent people, we wouldn't be having it either." My heart beat as I stared at them. They assumed they could walk all over me. They assumed I'd just say yes. I didn't have a plan yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The elevator reeked of dampness and cheap bleach, the distinct odor of early morning cleaning in ancient Manhattan buildings. But when I got to my apartment door, all I could smell was invasion. The door was slightly opened. The locks had been changed. Nathan and Jessica had not just moved in, they had taken complete possession. I pushed the door open and walked inside without asking permission. The mess remained, but now I saw it differently. As a declaration of war. My grandmother's old armchair, which always smelt like violet perfume, was now wrapped in a cheap gray blanket. The hand-embroidered cushions she'd made herself were gone. Have they thrown them away? My workstation, where I used to write at night with a glass of wine, was now cluttered with dirty baby garments. But the worst part was that my belongings were heaped in boxes in the hallway. What on earth is this? My voice was shrill and cold. Nathan went out of the kitchen, carrying a cup of coffee, as if this were his own home. "Oh, Lauren, you're back early. Don't waste my time with nonsense, Nathan. Why are my things in boxes?" Nathan shrugged and placed his coffee cup on the counter with a bang. Jessica thought it would be better to reorganize the space a little. You know, so the kid could have his own room. His own room, I repeated, hardly believing what I was hearing. Lauren, it's just a house. I gave out a sour laugh. No, Nathan, it's my house. Jessica emerged in the hallway, looking unhappy and holding a dish of cereal. Come on, Lauren, do you really need all this drama? She exclaimed, putting a bowl of cereal into her lips. You have money. I'm sure you can rent another place. I looked at her in bewilderment. Excuse me, sweetheart, Nathan said, using the same contrite tone he used to convince Mom he hadn't stolen money from her purse. We're just saying, you could share, it would really help us out. Share? I laughed, despite the fact that my tone was serious. And how exactly do you share your home with me? Oh, wait, you don't. Jessica sighed and placed her dish of cereal on the table. You're so selfish, Lauren. And you're a freeloader, I responded without hesitation. Nathan's face tightened. There's no need to make this ugly. Oh, really? I stepped nearer, seeing Jessica's instinctual movement slightly behind him. You know what actually needs to happen? You two need to get out of my apartment. Lauren. Nathan used his elder brother's voice, which had always worked on me as a kid. Mom and Dad also think it would be best if we use this place? There it was. The true reason for all of this. It was not simply Nathan and Jessica. Mom and Dad were also behind it. Rage burned throughout me. Mom with her insistence that family should always help each other. Dad with his passive participation. For years they had viewed me as the strong, independent one who was always forced to give in. Not this time. I crossed my arms and gave them a chilly smile. Interesting. I'd love to hear what a judge has to say. Jessica blinked with uncertainty. Nathan paled. What? I took out my phone and held it up for them to see. I have the inheritance papers. I have pictures of my things in boxes. Proof that you changed the locks and moved in without my permission. Do you really want to play this game and see what happens? Nathan clenched his jaw. You wouldn't take us to court. I wouldn't be so sure, I answered, sliding my finger across the screen as if I were already searching for a lawyer. Jessica hurriedly leaned in and whispered something into Nathan's ear. He seemed annoyed, but said nothing. I stood there and waited. For the first time, I observed as control slipped from their grasp. They had no idea what to do because, for the first time, I wasn't portraying the understanding sister. I didn't have a flawless strategy yet, but one thing was certain. This wasn't going to go as they expected. Nathan raked his hand through his hair, frustrated. His gaze shifted between Jessica and myself as if looking for an easy way out. Jessica, on the other hand, had no trouble continuing to play the victim. Lauren, you don't have to act like this. We're just trying to organize things as a family. I laughed directly in his face. Organize? No, sweetheart. Organizing means asking before barging into someone else's home. What you're doing is theft. Jessica made an angry grunt and crossed her arms. Oh my God, such drama. We're just trying to have a better life. At my expense. She shrugged, as if nothing unusual had happened. Nathan, who had been trying to maintain his usual conciliatory tone, shifted tactics. You know what? Mom and Dad are right about you. You think you're better than us just because you have money and can afford to live alone? There it was, the low blow. I felt my anger rising, but I kept it under control. Think I'm better? I laughed dryly. I don't need to think about it, Nathan. I am. I noticed his jaw clench, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. Growing up, Nathan was always the favorite. The son, the eldest, the person who was never blamed for anything. I was the person who had to share, the one who needed to assist, the person who always had to give in. But now I have what he lacked: independence, success, and he despised it. Look, Lauren, he said, his voice strained with tolerance. However, I cut him off quickly. Now, you're going to listen to me. I took out my phone again and browsed through my contacts. I'm calling the police. Nathan's eyes widened with shock. Jessica laughed incredulously. You wouldn't dare. I placed the call on speaker and pressed the dial. 1, 2. Wait! Nathan exclaimed, rushing forward to grab my arm. I gave him an icy smile. Yes, Lauren, please. There's no need to make this bigger than it is. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? What do you call breaking into someone's home, changing the locks, and kicking out the legal owner? Nathan gulped hard. He knew the answer. Look, just give me a couple of days. Jessica was furious as she turned to face him. A couple of days? Are you kidding me? Nathan ignored her and looked at me pleadingly. We'll sort this out. We'll leave. I ended the call before it connected and gave him a triumphant smile. You have 48 hours. Not a minute more. Without saying anything, I grabbed one of my boxes containing my belongings and walked toward the door. I turned to look over my shoulder just before walking out. Oh, and by the way, if a single one of my things goes missing, I'll press charges anyway. I left before they could say anything more. As I walked down the stairs, adrenaline surged through my veins. Nathan was cornered and knew it. But I was not stupid. I knew my brother would not give up easily. So the moment I stepped out my own building, I did 3 things. I called a locksmith. I wasn't going to let them get away with it again. If Nathan didn't leave in 48 hours, I would be the one to change the locks. I called my lawyer. Yes, I had a lawyer, because unlike my family, I planned ahead. I called Mom. I was expecting her fake concerned tone from the moment she answered. Lauren, sweetheart, why the fuss? Nathan said you had a hysterical meltdown. I closed my eyes and drew a deep breath. Mom. Tell me the truth. How long have you known they've moved into my apartment? There was a pause, just long enough to confirm my suspicions. I don't see it that way. They have a child, Lauren. I smiled without humor. Uh-huh. So you did know. Do not exaggerate. And if they had taken over someone else's home, how would you excuse it? But it isn't anyone else, Lauren. It's your brother. Family helps family. The same old sentence, no mom. Family does not steal from family. Lauren. I hung up. I knew Nathan was going to try something. Maybe Mom will call to manipulate me. Maybe Jessica would play the victim. I didn't care. This time I was determined to make sure they departed for good. The next 2 days were hell. Constant calls and messages. Mom, Dad, Nathan, Jessica. Everyone is attempting to persuade me to change my viewpoint. Lauren, do you actually want your nephew to be homeless? My mother's voice was laden with guilt, as if I were a cruel monster. Sweetheart, just think this through. Dad, the ineffective peacemaker. Lauren, this is crazy. You're acting like a child, Nathan said, becoming increasingly desperate. Auntie, how can you be this cold? We simply wanted stability for our son. Jessica is the queen of emotional manipulation. I disregarded each one of them. While they wasted time attempting to guilt-trip me, I carried out my strategy. Update: the lock has changed. At 7 a.m. on the second day, the locksmith was already at my doorstep. So they changed the locks without your permission? The man grumbled as he studied it. Yes, I replied, crossing my arms. And now I want it back. Nathan and Jessica lost access to my residence in less than 30 minutes. No more invasions, no more excuses. Nathan tried to call me at noon. I ignored him. He arrived at the building about 5 p.m. He banged on the door like a lunatic. Lauren, open the door now. I sat comfortably on my couch, sipping my coffee, as he shouted from the doorway. After 10 minutes, he gave up. The message was plain. The following day, Mom decided to become involved. Sweetheart, we need to talk. We met in a coffee cafe near her home. She arrived with her normal martyr attitude, which she used to make me feel guilty. This has gone too far, she stated, placing her cup of tea on the table. Nathan is devastated. I rolled my eyes. He's heartbroken because he can't stay in my house for free anymore. Poor thing. Mom sighed, as if burdened by an impossible daughter. Look at Lauren. He is your brother. He's not my problem. Of course he is, she replied, frowning. Family should always help each other. I leaned forward and rested my elbows on the table. Tell me something, Mother. If I broke into Nathan's house without permission, changed the locks and kicked him out, would you defend me as well? Mom opened her mouth and said nothing. That's what I thought. Lauren. Her voice became more tired. Why are you doing this? I grinned slowly. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not going to let people walk all over me. Mom remained mute. She realized she'd lost the war. She stood up, grabbed her coat, and looked at me sadly. I just hope one day you understand what it means to be family. I shrugged. I just hope one day you understand what it means to respect your daughter. She left without looking back. When I arrived at my flat that night, there was an envelope on the floor. It was from Nathan. Inside was a note, with his untidy handwriting strewn across the page. Congratulations, you won. But don't be surprised if one day you need anything and no one is around to help. I let out a laugh and ripped the paper in half. Nathan was gone. He'd lost. I closed the door and sank into the couch, smiling. This time, I was the one who established the rules. The silence in my flat felt unusual. It was no longer the emptiness of invasion, but the tranquility of victory. Nathan and Jessica were gone. Their final weak threat was discarded, but I was not naive. I knew it wasn't over yet, and I was correct. On Sunday morning, my phone rang. Mom. I didn't respond. 2 minutes later, another call. Dad. I sighed and disregarded it. The third call was from an unknown number. Who is this? I inquired as I took up. Lauren. It's Dad. I rolled my eyes. Of course, now they were calling from a different number because they knew I wouldn't answer. What do you want? Listen. His voice grew tired. Your mom and I have been discussing. Can we meet? No. A tense hush. Lauren, we can't keep going like this. Oh, really? I answered, acting surprised. Because I can. Nathan is in a really bad place. I laughed. Yeah, sure. What's wrong? Can't live off of me anymore? Dad exhaled. It's not that I don't care. Don't call me again to ask for favors. I hung up before he could say another thing. That was the first time I'd ever hung up on my father, and it felt fantastic. The following weeks were unusually calm. There was no Nathan, Jessica, or the continual feeling that someone else was in control of my life. However, as expected, the peace did not last long. A month later, Jessica messaged me. Lauren, I know you're angry, but Nathan has been really depressed. He's not himself. Can we talk? I stared at the computer, contemplating whether to laugh or simply block her. Depressed? Of course he was depressed. His comfortable life at my expense had come to an end. Rather than responding, I accomplished something better. I blocked her phone number. The truth always prevails. The last I heard about Nathan was from a cousin at a family reunion months later. His attempt to find a better place had failed. Without my free flat, Michael and Jessica were forced to rent a small apartment in New Jersey, far from their dream lifestyle in Manhattan. And best of all, Jessica left him. She said she got tired of Nathan doing nothing, my cousin explained as she stirred her coffee. She took the kid and filed for divorce. I smiled and sipped my wine. Karma. Mom and Dad tried to make things better over time, but things never went back to normal. The barrier between us was more than simply physical. It was emotional. I was no longer the obedient daughter who answered yes to everything, and they had no idea how to deal with it. They eventually quit trying. I last saw Nathan by coincidence months later. I was walking past a coffee shop when I noticed him, phone in hand, and stared blankly. He saw me. I saw him. We didn't say anything, we just continued walking, because he was no longer involved in my life. The morning sun crept through my window, illuminating every aspect of my home, because yes, it was finally mine. There are no more toys spread around, no more rearranging furniture, no more invaders making decisions for me. I wandered into my living room with a cup of coffee, enjoying the silence. A different type of silence. Previously, it felt empty, like if something was missing. Now it felt like liberation. I sat on the couch and opened my laptop. I'd been thinking about something for days, a Reddit post, my story. I wrote it last night, but I didn't dare to upload it until now. My brother and his wife moved into my flat since they needed it more. When I kicked them out, my family portrayed me as the villain. My brother is now broke, his wife has abandoned him, and my parents are attempting to resume normalcy. They call me cold. They believe family is the most important thing, and I should be more understanding. But why am I always the one who needs to understand? Why is it never them? Should I forgive them or cut them off forever? I read the question over and over. Did I truly want reconciliation? I looked at the screen, contemplating. Dad sent me a mail the other day. Lauren, could we talk? Your mom is worried. Worried about what? Because Nathan was broke? Because Jessica left him? Because their child had to live in a modest apartment rather than mine? Not because they'd harmed me, not because they felt guilty, but because of them. I was only useful for as long as I could provide them with something. I took a long breath before lowering my sight to the keyboard. My heart pounded. Whatever decision I made now would shape the rest of my life. I could ignore them indefinitely. I could offer them another chance. I could exact revenge. I bit my lip. The question was still present. The cursor continued blinking. I still wasn't sure what to do, so I squeezed my lips together and hit the post. Now all that remained was to wait. I slid down the couch, sipped some coffee, and opened the comments. What would you do in my position? I awoke to the sound of hundreds of notifications. My Reddit post had taken off. Thousands of people left comments, shared thoughts, and analyzed my narrative like if it were a television show. But what struck me the most were the remarks that were not in my favor. I do not know Lauren. I understand that your brother was wrong, but did he really need to wind up on the street with his child? After all, he is family. The flat belonged to your grandma, and you were both her grandchildren. It does not seem fair that just you received it. Didn't Nathan deserve something too? I'm not suggesting your brother was a saint, but changing the locks and throwing them out in 48 hours seemed excessive. In the end, everything backfired on you, right? Because your parents remain on Nathan's side. It seemed that no matter what you did, you would never win. That last comment impacted me harder than I thought, because they were correct. I closed my eyes and drew a long breath. My parents had always taken Nathan's side, since we were children. He was the oldest son, the one who made Mom and Dad beam with pride during family gatherings, the one who received support when he failed, the person who never had to show himself worthy of affection. In contrast, I needed to work for it. If I received decent grades, it was the least expected of me. If I had troubles, it was because I was oversensitive. If I needed something, there was always something more essential to deal with. But with my paternal grandma, things were different. She was the one person who made me feel like I belonged. Perhaps she knew what it was like to be left out. My mother never liked her. They never got along. I suppose in her mind, I was her mother-in-law's granddaughter, not her daughter. So my grandmother was there for me when my parents weren't. She taught me how to cook and care for plants. She told me stories about her childhood in New Orleans as we sipped hot chocolate in the cold. That's why she abandoned me at her flat. It wasn't favoritism. It was love. However, when my parents read the inheritance, it appeared to be an injustice. They said it wasn't fair. Grandma didn't consider Nathan's future. Lauren, you don't need so much space. Don't be too stubborn. He's still your brother. As I read the comments on Reddit, everything came back to me, and I realized something I had never wanted to accept. Yes, I was upset with how they had treated me. Yes, I was tired of being the one who constantly had to compromise. But what matters the most? Yes. I envied Nathan. When I saw it in a remark, I nearly dropped my phone. Lauren, I know your brother mistreated you, but have you ever considered that your fury isn't limited to this situation? It appears that you've spent your entire life hoping that your parents will notice you and, for once, choose you. However, they never did. Perhaps this accounts for some of your hostility. Ugh, seriously? Yes, that was it. I had always hoped that at least once my parents would protect me, that they would say, Lauren is correct. This belongs to her, that they would not instantly support Nathan. However, they never did. I'd spent years pretending it didn't hurt. I convinced myself that I didn't need their approval, but if I honestly didn't care, why did it ache so badly? I massaged my face with both hands. I had no answers. Should I speak with my parents about this? Will it even be worthwhile? Or more significantly, did I want to be in a relationship with them anymore? The question persisted in my head while I glanced at the screen. My post received numerous comments. But this time, I was unsure if I wanted to continue reading. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.